Imagine, you're a boy living in the 1900s. Where do you live? Doesn't matter, the British control everything. That's kinda sucky, you may think. The rest of the world agrees. So, what happens now?
Decolonization.
Let's take a look at India. The British controlled India for over 200 years, starting back in the good old days of 1757. In the 19th century, the British started to group people based on their religion. How many religions were there? A lot. There were the Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, Buddhists, Christians, Puris, and Jews. Grouping these people on religion was a gross simplification of the communities in India. The Hindus were the majority, with Muslims being the largest minority. Sikhs were considered part of the Hindus community by everyone but themselves. That's kinda rude. During elections, people could only vote for candidates of their own religious identity. These practices caused a huge social divide between communities that previously coexisted. Now, as the 20th century began, anti-colonial movements sprouted. India began its fight for self-rule with the foundation of the National Indian Congress. One of the biggest leaders they had was Mohandas Gandhi. You might have heard of him, he's kinda popular. Anyways, the Muslim League was also formed in 1906 and advocated for the separate nation for Indian Muslims. Muhammad Ali Jinnah led the Muslim minority. He believed the broken relationship caused by colonization could not be repaired. Because of this, he argued for a two-nation division, where Muslims would have a homeland called Pakistan. However, before any of this could happen, they had one big problem.
The British.
So, the Muslims and Hindus agreed to get along to push the British out. How did they do this?
Mass civil disobedience.
Countless peaceful protests happened, and in 1930, Gandhi organized the Salt Satyagraha. This was an act of non-violent civil disobedience. The 24-day march lasted from the 12th of March 1930 to the 5th of April 1930 as a direct action campaign of tax resistance and non-violent protests against the British salt monopoly. British cloth and goods were also boycotted. Gandhi also literally starved himself for 6 days straight, and somehow that convinced the British to just leave. They were also severely weakened by the Second World War, but starvation sounds a little cooler. Yeah. So, after the British negotiated terms of independence for South Asia, tension between Muslims and Hindus grew once again. And finally, in 1947, alongside India gaining independence, the creation of Pakistan was formed. Actually, 2 Pakistans were formed. One of them could become Bangladesh later. Hindus and Muslims started to migrate to areas where they thought they could be part of the religious majority. Anyways, let's take a boat and sail south. There's a cool tiny island called Sri Lanka. Do you know who colonized it? You guessed it.
The British.
In the beginning, the British forced thousands of Tamils from India to come work in plantations. The British also brought industrialization with them, which made the island switch from a feudal state to a modern state. They didn't have anything going on, and after they became a modern state, they were kind of bored. So they decided, hey, let's become independent. And that's exactly what happened. After the British became weak after the Second World War, they were kicked out. They officially gained independence from Britain on February 4th, 1948, when the Constitution of 1947 went into effect. The Constitution provided for a bicameral legislature with popularly elected House of Representatives and a Senate that was partly nominated and partly elected indirectly by members of the House of Representatives. The first Prime Minister was the leftist D.S. Senanayake. Many people consider him the father of the nation due to his leadership in the Sri Lankan independence movement. It wasn't until the 4th Prime Minister, however, that conflict started to rise. The 4th Prime Minister, Solomon West Ridgway Diaz Bayanayarika, declared Sinhala to be the only official language of the land. This severely angered the Tamils, so angry in fact that this one Buddhist monk decided to assassinate the Prime Minister. More leftist policies were pursued, and division grew between the Sinhalese and Tamils. Now, what happens when one group oppresses another group of people?
War.
The Tamils created their own militant group to create a separate state, and thus, in 1983, the Sri Lankan Civil War started. Over 100,000 people died. 40,000 Tamils died in the final months of fighting alone. It finally ended in 2009, with the Sri Lankan government winning. This didn't end the turmoil, however. In 2019, they went into a severe economic crisis. Violent protests flared up that resulted in a prime minister fleeing the country. So that was the decolonization of India and Sri Lanka in a nutshell. After years of fighting for their independence, they are finally free to live in harmony. That's what I would say if it was true. India is still fighting against Pakistan for the Kashmir region. And in Sri Lanka, the Tamils still hate the Sinhalese. In 2022, there are still a ton of protests against the Sri Lankan government. India and Sri Lankan post-independence are very similar. The only difference is that the minority in India were able to gain an independent state in Pakistan, while the Tamils were forced to live under the Sinhalese control. There's still a lot of infighting between these two countries, and hopefully they can solve their crisis.